Hello, everybody, for this week's developer session. The agenda for this week is rather short or contained. It's about a handover for some nodes, like the seed nodes or price nodes and so on. And the second part will be talk a little bit about the protection tools, what we are working on against this chargeback scam incidents. So regarding the nodes, we have several different nodes, which are all represented as roles in the repository. Not all these nodes require a bonded role, only those which contain a little bit more risk in a way, or that the node operator could theoretically create damage. Unfortunately, the bonds are rather high for most of the nodes, and not all node operators will have earned enough BSQ to be able to lock up this bond, or maybe they don't want to lock up all the BSQ what they have. So I would recommend to not take it too strict with requiring immediately the bonds. I think we can fade in this bonding also with other roles and stuff. It also helps a little bit to avoid, when we find any bugs or whatever, and that not too much BSQ are locked up. I mean, when there would be a bug, so the people would get reimbursed anyway. But I think it's justified to not start immediately with the first months 100% with all the bonded roles, but to fade it in.
Manfred, do you advise not to kind of submit bonded roles proposal?
No, I think everybody who can afford it and who is willing to do it, I think it's good, because I think it should start the process and should show how it works and so on. It's just a little bit limiting when we would require it, then some of the people who are invited to take over some of the nodes couldn't do it because they don't have enough BSQ, and the damage is higher like the benefit, because I mean there's basically no real risk that those people who I ask for taking over role, that they are whatever doing any harm or so. And yeah, it helps to distribute these nodes better. But basically, everybody who has enough BSQ to can afford it and who is willing to do it is very welcome. I think we should basically start this process. It's just not mandatory, I would suggest, because otherwise we are putting higher restrictions on us. Like it's makes sense. Towards on the decentralization aspect at the moment, because BSQ is not so widely distributed yet until so many people, not so many people have high amounts of BSQ around. So there are, I make a quick summary of which nodes we have. The seed nodes, one of the most important. They're responsible when the user connects the first time for the application to learn about the peer-to-peer network, but they're also responsible for delivering the initial data. So as long as you are not fully connected, that the owner address is published, which takes half a minute, you receive their offers and other data from the seed nodes. And additionally, now with the DAO, they are delivering certain data for the DAO. As one is the filtered blocks, also the Bitcoin blocks filtered by BSQ transactions. Also one BSQ block only contains transactions which are relevant for BSQ. Besides that, there are basically naked data, and the validation and all happens on the client. Then they are providing the hashes for the DAO state and for the proposals and for the blind votes. So initially you get these hashes from all the seed from the seed nodes with which you are connected, which is usually 2 or 3. Then later, when you're longer online, you get with every block also the hashes from other nodes. And then delivering the normal peer-to-peer network data also for the DAO, like the proposals and the blind votes and so on. Then we have the seed nodes are probably the most important, that they're really 100% stable. We have some issues with some sort of memory leak or whatever. It's still not 100% clear what it is. And Florian is working on this, and I think he had already kind of like a solution, but it's not complete. But we have a mechanism that they are restarting automatically when memory goes over a certain level. And usually they work pretty stable, but sometimes the restart fail or whatever, and then you need to manually restart them. We have a few monitoring services for checking if they're really online, mainly 2, so 3 in total. One is from Mike, one I have done, and one is the new one from Florian. I would say the one from Florian and mine is the most usable. I think the one from Mike produced a lot of false positives. It's the best to check both, because sometimes mine are, they have the same issue with this restart and so on, and sometimes the restart doesn't work, so sometimes the monitor is just down, or sometimes when a seed node was short time not available, it's not 100% reliable that the seed node will, also when it become available again, that the monitor discovered that it available, it shows still an error, and you need to restart the monitor that it's clean state again. So it's, it was just a quick and dirty implementation, and as emergency basically when we had once issues. And monitoring from what Florian started should be basically the high quality professional, but it's still also, it has still also some issues. Also the last weeks it was offline again, and so I think the infrastructure, I don't know what's the reason, run out of memory or run out of space or whatever, but it has been a few times. So best is to use 2 monitoring services for checking the seed nodes. Actually, I have 2. Also, at the end there are 3, because I created a new monitor which is also checking the number of blocks what you receive from the seed node, to see if the seed nodes are really delivering the last blocks or the latest blocks. The number are not always 100% the same, because there's quite a delay for receiving these blocks. So it's okay when the numbers are a little bit different, but when there's a big gap, then it's basically an alert. The seed nodes require also quite a little bit of resources. Also, they need to have the Bitcoin full node running for the DAO with transaction index set to 1, which requires a little bit more space like a normal full node, so roughly 300 gigabyte. Then, the whole setup for the DAO. And at the moment, I run all the seed nodes with 4 gigabyte, which seems to be stable, and I recommend everybody, or I request everybody, to use exactly the same resource requirements and not go below, because at the moment the damage would be too big. When one seed node is not working stable, there can be problems with messages not delivered, and that can be very problematic in disputes, for instance, when mailbox messages are not arrived and the arbitrator doesn't get a message from the other peer and then close the dispute because of lack of information and make maybe a wrong payout. Such things happened. And so it's really important that the seed nodes are as stable as possible. Florian will work on this to improve the seed node, so it will in future require much less resources. Basically, they should run with 500 megabyte RAM. Also, the seed node alone, Bitcoin Core, also doesn't require so much. So at the end, when everything is optimized, I think 1 or 2 gigabyte, probably 2 gigabyte should be good enough. The Bitcoin node can run with not accepting connections from outside, because at the moment we don't want to mix it, to use those Bitcoin nodes as provided nodes. A little bit later, when we are very stable and maybe some of the seed nodes could start that they're offering their Bitcoin nodes as provided nodes as well, would be good. Basically, then we have more provided nodes. Provided nodes are the Bitcoin full nodes, what the users usually are connecting to. But at the moment, I don't want to add any risk, especially with the DAO. It's very critical when the seed nodes are not working. Most users are running their application as light node, and then they are depending to get the blocks from the seed node or from other full nodes. So it's very important that they're really stable. But for future optimization, that's for sure on the table as well, to use then those Bitcoin nodes as fully connected nodes and as provided nodes for normal peers as well. Besides the seed nodes, we have the price nodes. They are also quite important, and I mean they have very low resource requirements and run super stable. Basically, nearly never issues. Sometimes we have to adjust a little bit the fee parameters, but I think at the moment I don't see that they should be changed anymore. We're still using this earn.com fee estimation, which unfortunately works not very good. So we are usually overpaying. But as long as nobody works on a custom fee estimation service, we have to stick with this. And good thing is maintenance is basically close to 0. Resources are close to 0. And it's just important, of course, that they're reliable and trusted persons, because theoretically, when you would deliver a wrong price, because prices are used for percentage-based offers, the exchange rate prices. So basically, it's an attack surface. Scammer who would act. Of course, operational security is an important part. So everybody who runs Node have to be good on operational security. I usually don't ask or offer Node operation to anybody who is not very technical and good with this. And yeah, when somebody would manage to hack your price node, he could theoretically manipulate the price and can make trades. And so we probably will discover it quickly and close it. But we can block such malicious nodes as well. Also with this filter message, what we're using now to block the scammer, we can also block all kinds of nodes, Bitcoin nodes, seed nodes, price nodes, and so on. So it's not a big risk, but yeah, there is some trust involved. That's why those are usually bonded roles. Then there is the relay node. There's only one. That's for the notification service for the mobile application. It's also basically zero maintenance, low resource requirements. It's a little bit of privacy trust, because theoretically the operator could collect the data, which onion address requested the data, and map it to their mobile identity, and use this data for whatever, breaking a little bit of privacy for users. But I think it's also relatively low risk. But for this reason, of course, we cannot give it to any anonymous person. It has to be somebody who we trust and should be basic. I'm not 100% up to date which roles are bonded roles or not. Maybe I can look up afterwards. Also, seed nodes are for sure bonded roles, but from the others, I'm not sure, because at the end there's a very low risk, and I didn't want to overuse the bonded role feature for every small thing. Then there are the Bitcoin nodes, as I mentioned already. They're just normal full nodes, also not pruned mode, but they don't require transaction index. And yeah, they are fully connected to the network, and they are added to our list of provided nodes. They should run both as Onion and as ClearNet nodes, and the best is when we provide both a domain name and the IP address. So it's a little bit more flexible with the domain name when the IP address would change. So yeah, usually the first is that we try to use the Onion address. When the user doesn't use Tor, then it uses the domain name. When the domain name cannot be resolved, then it falls back to the IP address, or when there is no domain name. And as well, nearly no maintenance effort. Yeah, and from time to time, when there are updates, it's not bad to update. But basically, I think it's good that not everybody is updating. That's actually also for the seed node. So when there are software updates, it's good to distribute it a little bit, that only a part of the nodes are updating immediately, because when we introduce a bug, especially on the peer-to-peer side, and so it can be very damaging when none of the nodes is working. So it's always good, especially when there are more risky updates, to just start with 2 or 3 nodes and then let it running 1 or 2 weeks and then go on and update later. Usually they're very rarely functional changes which require a hard update from the seed nodes or any other nodes. So at the moment, I think the relay node was not updated since half a year. Actually, we have Devin has discovered a problem. He wanted to update, and it's not 100% clear. It's maybe a Java 10 issue. And also the other nodes, and with the DAO, the seed nodes have to be updated. But beside that, usually it's not hardly required that they update with every release. And the Bitcoin node as well, when there's a new Bitcoin release, it's good when some people update, but probably it's also good that we have a mix, and some older nodes and some younger nodes, because when there are some changes which could, and it could be that in future Bitcoin Core, there are some tendencies that SPV mode is not, is not supported or is not considered as positive feature for Bitcoin. So it could be in future that SPV mode will become harder and so on. So when everybody would update, could cause drawbacks or problems maybe. But Oscar will be our expert there, so he can make suggestions when this would happen. Then there are Explorer nodes for the BSQ Explorer.
Is there like a tutorial how to run a Bitcoin node for to be used?
I think so in the roles description, I think there's a little bit information. I'm not 100% sure if there is a tutorial, but it's basically I mean, the only little bit complex thing is to install Tor, but it's just a normal Tor installation on a Linux server where you assign the port to what you want to forward to Tor. But I think there is some documentation there. If not, I mean, I think for all the roles there is a maintainer who is basically responsible for something like documentation, and who is when there is a code repository, who is responsible for the code repository, and who should basically provide such information. And so I think there is some GitHub. Yeah.
Okay. I was wondering how to limit the number of connections, and at the same time, other Bitcoin nodes eating all my connections and not allowing BSQ node to connect to the provider node.
Yeah, that's a good point. Also, all the parameters they should be shared, and sometimes I think they are mandatory, especially for the price node, for instance. It's absolutely mandatory that everybody has exactly the same parameters. Otherwise, their fee or as it's mainly for the mining fee would be different. And for the seed node, it's also very important because I tested quite a lot with different parameters, and I found a kind of like an optimum, and it's better to not experiment again. I mean, Florian will do this experimentation and trying to optimize, but the other people should just use the parameters what I provide. On the Bitcoin node, there are also some suggested parameters of the allowed whatever connections, memory, and so on. One other thing is the node operator should run by default on hosted services. Running a node at home at the private server, it has turned out to not work very well. There are some exceptions, like I think Thomas is doing it. He has a very professional environment, and so also there are exceptions where I think, okay, let's see how it works. But by default, when you're not able or willing to host a professional server where you have guaranteed uptime, basically 100%, then I would prefer that somebody else is taking the role, because here we have the main issue is stability. We don't have an issue here with censorship resistant or whatever, that DigitalOcean would suddenly discover that they want to shut down all the BISC nodes, and then very quickly we could distribute it. So that's really not the issue here. And and there are also nearly no legal risk involved by running one of the nodes. So I think here it's really, we should have to focus on the right thing, which is stability and performance. And you get usually the best stability and performance by normal hosted services. There are exceptions, like Thomas. He has very good infrastructure and will run probably on his own infrastructure nodes. But beside that, for all the others, I would recommend to not run a node when you cannot provide this. Also, I don't recommend to run it completely, as when you want to be completely anonymous. We had these cases in the past. SQ was wanted to do this, and then his node got shut down without any notice, and they said, yeah, he's doing Bitcoin mining or whatever bullshit, or the node the hosting node get attacked by DDoS or whatever. I mean, those services which provide anonymous, that you can rent anonymous hosting service, are usually also used by criminals or by shady guys, or get attacked more. So it has turned out that it's very problematic, and it creates more damage like it helps. I mean, as said, we have performance and scalability priorities here, not censorship and privacy priorities, because as long there are enough people, and when it would happen, it's very easy to make it more anonymous and more private. So I think we should really focus here on the right thing, and can be one. I mean, like when we have at the moment we have 8 seed nodes. When one seed node is running on a more privacy server, and maybe once in half a year he's offline for 2 days because there was some issue, we can live with it. But it shouldn't be more like maximum 10% of the nodes, basically, which could be affected by something like this. Yeah, the Explorer is also running a Bitcoin full node, a HTTP server with, I think it's also accessible over Tor, I'm pretty sure. There is a DNS entry for this. So one is explorer.bisq.network, but we would like to have at least 2 Explorers. So there's a backup, maybe explorer2.bisq.network. And yeah, nothing really super special. I mean, of course, should run stable. Technically, it's a Bitcoin full node, a seed node, which is not registered as seed node. So users are not using it as seed node, but technically it's the same like a seed node with 1 extra parameters for dumping the JSON files for the HTTP server, and the server, which is a Python application, which is taking the dumped JSON from the Java application and interpret it correctly for the UI. I think Thomas wanted to start to work on a more sophisticated UI. The current UI it works, but it's not super sophisticated and super nice and intuitive. So something like the blockstream.info UI or infrastructure would be cool, but not a hard priority, but basically open bounty project when somebody wants to work on this. Then there is the monitors I said before. Florian is operating the main monitors with Grafana. I'm running 2 monitors, one the older version and one the newer version, which is also collecting the number of blocks from the seed nodes. And Mike is running a monitor which also reports the prices. In the other monitors, or at least in my monitor, it's only the Bitcoin nodes and the seed nodes covered. And in Florian's monitor, I'm not sure if the Bitcoin prices and the mining fee is reported. So for this data, Mike's node is usable. It's useful. And we should get the monitor hopefully soon to a state where they're really 100% reliable and no false positives. So, and then people get alerted. So when your seed node is not running, you get an alert on Slack or by whatever other mechanism, so that you can quickly fix it and try to get it running again. So far, it has not been stable enough, the monitoring system, that the alerts would have been just annoying. Actually, there's another monitoring tool for the seed nodes. There's a Python script from an older contributor from the earlier days who is running this and who is sending, I think only me at the moment, the email when a seed node is not reachable over Tor. He's just connecting by Tor to a seed node and disconnecting immediately. And when it's not reachable, I get the email. And it's quite useful when a server has really problems. Then I get spammed with emails and I take it serious. So it's happy that it's still running. And we could ask this guy to that maybe some other people get these messages as well. Would be good. What else? Yeah, then I think the last one is the markets server. It's it's a PHP application which contributor has implemented, who has also been more active in the earlier days. And it delivers at the moment, as earlier it was really delivering the HTTP, it was acting as a web server. Now with the new web page, it was changed. Pedro has changed this and only used the API to, so the market server only provides the data over API, and then the web page is interpreting the API data and doing the rendering and the UI display itself. There might be some risk with DDoS and scalability. Also, Dan was not very happy when Pedro did this move. I didn't have time to get into this, and I'm also not an expert in this domain. So it's also basically an area where we would like to find a new maintainer who is really taking responsibility for the market server. The PHP, there are not many people anymore who are doing PHP, so it would be maybe good basically to when somebody's taking over this, I think probably might be likely that somebody's writing it new with a more modern language like Python or whatever. But yeah.
Maybe someone from Facebook with the PHP background want to join in.
They are still using PHP.
I don't know, but they used it for a long time. I don't know how much of the infrastructure is still running on PHP.
No, I don't want to blame PHP. I think it's just not in favor anymore. It's harder to find developer. I think it's probably still a solid language and so on, and probably not worse like others. I'm at least not an expert to make here an assessment, but and this guy, he was a PHP contributor to the PHP project, so he was pretty good on this. So it was not a bad choice from this side. From this side, it was only the problem that when you look for another developer and say it's implemented in PHP, then it's harder to find. Like when you would say it's implemented in Python, that's my only concern. So what else? I think that's all. Does anybody have I forgot any note? But I think those are all the notes what we have, or
I think so.
Yeah, as said, at the moment I don't want to offer any notes. Also, the notes are usually hard-coded in the code, like the Bitcoin notes, the seed notes, the relay notes, basically all the nodes. I mean, the markets node is not part of the application, that's only used on the web page. So to change addresses and so is always a little bit difficult, because when you are revoking your node, then the old clients they still try to connect. Takes in the next release your node will be removed, and then it takes a while until there are not many old nodes anymore who try to connect to your node. I mean, all these nodes have anyway several nodes, and I think on the price node, I think we have only 2. So there it's more critical. When one price node would really change and would not be available anymore, then 50% of the connections will fail from all nodes. So for this reason, especially with Onion, it's super easy. You just hand over the private key to somebody else and no problem. With IP addresses, doesn't work. With domains, it's also easier. Of course, with Onion, it's not 100% secure in a way, because the old owners still have the private key. But as long there is not a trust and security issue, also as long as those nodes are only provided to trusted people, contributors and developers, I don't see any realistic problem there. So at the moment, I'm usually doing that. I just hand over the private key of the Onion address to the new operator. I was taking back all the seed nodes for the DAO launch, because I wanted to be sure to have it fully under control when there are any issues, to be able to react quickly. As we have seen, it runs now stable. There have not been really issues anymore. So I think now it's time. I started already with other contributors to do the handover. And basically, over the next few weeks, I would like to hand over all the nodes what I was running, to get the project more to a really decentralized state on the infrastructure side as well. With the Bitcoin nodes, I don't care so much, because they are the least relevant, probably. The biggest, I mean, seed nodes, I think I have persons for all, relay and price node as well. I mean, monitor is also not super critical. I mean, there are already some other people, and the 2 monitor nodes what I'm running, and maybe this email notification, when somebody is willing to take this over and to get basically also this email notification, let me know, would be happy, but it's not super important. Explorer, I think, is also covered basically, and Bitcoin nodes, I think we have 14 at the moment. Basically, the more the better, but I mean, there's a little bit of risk, of course, when it would be somebody who either gets hacked by a chain analysis company, or who colludes with it and sell the data to a chain analysis company. We would have the Bloom filter problem back. As with our provided nodes, we are basically trust the node operators that they're not spying on the users, and then the users don't lose privacy. So it's a kind of like a acceptable solution, but it depends that those operators are honest, of course. At the moment, I don't have any doubt that anybody would not be honest. But the more we extend, and the more we extend to people who are not 100% well known and not personally known or trusted, even if they're a contributor but nobody met them really in real life, I would still be conservative, because the gain to have 15 instead of 14 nodes is super tiny. But the risk when this would be either hacked or would be a malicious operator is quite big, because then over time they would collect basically all the data from all their users, because you are connecting usually to 8 nodes out of the 14. That's more than 50%. And with the second time you start the application, you get probably to other 8 nodes. And yeah, after a few times connecting, those one single node has a very high chance to reach basically all the Bisq users. And with this Bloom filter privacy issues, you would basically lose the privacy about your wallet, that he would learn about all your addresses, that all those addresses belong to one user. So for this reason, I still would recommend to stay conservative with extending the Bitcoin nodes only to, yeah, as said, to persons who are quite active in Bisq and who are personally known, basically. So some people, it's good that we have completely anonymous contributors, but at the moment, I think the risk and benefit ratio is just not good enough to extend it to those people. Yeah, any questions or input? As said, at the moment, I prefer to keep it to developers and highly technical persons, also people who are very experienced with operations and system security, or developers, or both, of course, in the best case. Other contributors who are maybe also technical, but who are not so deep into the technical realm, I prefer to keep out at the moment, because, yeah, as I said, the risks are, the risk that somebody managed to hack your server and then get access to all the data or manipulate, do any harm, is some risk, and that's a higher risk with people who are not so technical, like with people who are more professional on this area.
Just one more thing to mention regarding the Bitcoin node configuration. I think Tomasz was thinking about preparing a kind of a default config everyone can reuse, and he also recently posted in Slack, but I'm not sure if it's available anymore, a kind of a ban list of IP addresses, which helped for my instance. At least I had lots of traffic recently, and it went down afterwards again.
Yeah, actually, that might be also a little bit of risk, because we had some issues that some users couldn't connect or whatever, and it might be not related at all to this. But one of the things where I thought maybe could be the reason, because nearly all the Bitcoin nodes have used this ban list. I have not looked closely how exactly it works and what's exactly the concept behind it. And it happened in the same time frame that we applied over the last 1 or 2 months, and over the last weeks we got a few reports that people had issues with broadcasting or with connecting to Bitcoin nodes. It can be completely something else. There have also been some software changes and so on. It can be, or it's just a local user issue. But as I said, I would not recommend that everybody runs exactly the same thing. In certain areas, like with the seed node and the price node, it's nearly necessary. In others, I think we're more resilient when there is some difference. Also, when there would be a standard setup and there is a security weakness in this setup, and somebody find out that he can attack all the nodes. When everybody do different stuff, then it's much harder for an attacker. And of course, I think he also recommended to build it from source and so on, all fine, and also to run the latest version. I think at the end, we gain more by resilience and by having a little bit more mixed system, like to be all on the perfect edge, but by having a monoculture, basically, that everybody is doing exactly the same. From this point of view, and most people are anyway operators, they know themselves how to do this. They usually don't need a lot of instruction how to set up Bitcoin node or whatever. So I think it's maybe not such a bad idea that everybody is doing it a little bit on their own. And when their suggestion it's for sure not bad. But yeah, I think it's an aspect what we should keep in mind, that we are not causing risk from some sort of monoculture in the infrastructure. Yeah, regarding the all node operators get paid in BSQ, so you have to report every month in the DAO proposals which nodes you run and how much you charge. There is no hard. Yeah, we have basically a consensus. I think 50 BSQ per node is the standard payment. For those nodes which contain a Bitcoin full node, it can be a little bit higher because then hosting costs are usually $40 already. At least on DigitalOcean, I think it's roughly $40 or so for running a Bitcoin full node, and or the seed node and Explorer and so on. And especially those like the seed nodes, which will require a little bit more care with monitoring and with maintenance, or Explorer nodes and so on. I think they justify also a higher payment. When it's really more extra work, I think it should be treated extra as a normal compensation for like development work or whatever, or for the setup, for the one-time setup, you can charge that what's justified for you. But then the monthly rate should be more or less stable, that it's kind of like that the running costs. Maybe for the price and relay node, maybe can go down a little bit because I think the server costs are $5, maximum $10 for those, and there's zero maintenance nearly. But anyway, I mean, up to the contributor. And as said, yeah, the bonded. Let me quickly look. I can give an overview. 1 second. Yeah, there's a bonded role for the website operator, which is basically the guy who is running the server. Then the seed node, the data relay node, which is the price node. It's a little bit more general purpose because it also delivers the fee estimation, and it might be used for other data in future. Or it's basically a relay where we want to avoid that the users need to connect by ClearNet to some services. So they go over Tor to this relay node, and the relay node connects over ClearNet to the services like the Bitcoin average or like the fee estimation service, because usually those services either require API key and a paid plan like with Bitcoin average, or they don't support Tor connections. Then the Bitcoin nodes, one second, there's a markets operator. That's actually the market server. Sorry, the website operator is the one who is the website is hosted over this Netlify, so there's not really a operator for the website. It's a little bit I'm not 100% sure how this role is exactly defined. But yeah, the markets, then the BSQ Explorer, the mobile notifications relay operator, that is relay server. That's all basically. As for some of the smaller, what we had more, let me quickly see what's not covered. Bitcoin is covered, Explorer is covered. Yeah, the monitor are not covered. I think there's basically nearly no risk or no damage what the monitor operator could do. The market is covered, the price is covered, the relay is covered, and the seeds, all the others are covered. So it's only the monitor, the people who are running the monitor services who don't have a bonded role, or where there's no bonded role implemented for this. And as said, the bonded role, I see it a little bit as optional at the moment. When you can afford it to pay, even maybe you don't have, when you run several nodes, you can pay only for 1 or 2, but not for all. That's also fine. It's a kind of security as well for you, because nobody could steal. When somebody managed to hack your BISC application, he cannot steal your bond, because when he would unlock your bond, you can report it and we can confiscate it and you get reimbursed. So it's a little bit like a multi-sig with the DAO in a way. So everything what you have locked in a bonded role, a bonded reputation, as long, you can prove that it was basically either a hack or whatever incident, when there would be a bug with the bonded roles and people lose money, of course that will be then reimbursed, and nobody, the BSQ got burned and you get reimbursed for the DAO. It's a zero-sum thing, and when there is clear evidence and that's not your fault, then there's no reason that you shouldn't get it. So basically, for those who are long with BSQ, it's actually extra safe or security feature to put some of the BSQ into a bonded roll. And yeah, and the important thing is all the bonded rolls, also all the BSQ which are locked up in a bond, are subject for sort of interest rate, similar like running a node. You get a monthly payment for this. And when you have locked up 20,000 BSQ, there should be, we have to find a consensus, but not really discussed yet. But I think something like maybe, I don't know, 1% per month. So that's 10% per year. So when you lock up 20,000 BSQ, you get 2,000 BSQ over the year on interest rate. Something like this, I think, is justified, because at the end, yeah, you cannot trade. Yeah, it's a certain risk, and of course, you risk that the community could confiscate your bond for when you get hacked, and the community is hard with you and say, no, it's your fault, you didn't take care, and you should get confiscated. You can lose it theoretically. I don't assume that the BSQ stakeholder would be so brutal when it's not really your fault. But it's a certain risk, of course, and that has to be covered by some sort of interest rate. So that gives a little bit of benefit, of course. When you lock up, you can earn on the side a little bit of BSQ with this. Yeah, I think from my side, I covered all. Do you have any other questions or comments?
Not regarding the node stuff.
Goody, then let's jump to the second topic, the protection tool. Yeah, we started to work on this. There have been a few changes in the concept because while working on it, we found out a few problems. It's quite a challenge from the user experience and usability point of view, that it becomes not super annoying and restrictive and confusing for the user. So we are still fighting to find a good balance here. On the good side is that I think with both tools, as with the delayed payout plus the signing, that the arbitrators will sign all the old accounts which have completed a trade, as where the fiat has been transferred, as only the fiat transactions. As they're signing the account age of those users, indirectly the account. So when somebody is trading with such a user who has been signed by the arbitrators and who has created their account before mid of March or early March, also the scammer started end of March, the first accounts, what we've seen, we can be pretty sure that there have not been a chargeback and those have not been stolen bank account scammer. And all this protection tool is just about stolen bank account cases. It doesn't say that this is a cool trader who is releasing your Bitcoin and doesn't do future trades where he's canceling the trade when the price moves a lot. All this is not part of this. So it shouldn't give a wrong kind of reputation score. So that we are trying also to keep the vocabulary and so relatively neutral, that people are not interpreting too much into it. And yeah, with the signature, we get basically the proof that those who start, we start with those who get signed by the arbitrator. That's basically the root of the trust. Then when you are trading with one of those peers, you get your account age witness gets signed by them, and then after 1 month, you are considered valid as not as scammer as well. Because when there would have been a chargeback with the stolen account, usually the chargeback happened between 2 and 3 weeks, what we've seen. So it's very unlikely that after 1 month, still a chargeback happening. Theoretically, until half a year, they can do a chargeback on SEPA. But I think probability is very low that it will not be discovered earlier. So after 1 month, you are basically then signed as well, and you are authorized to how we call it now?
A confiscation or
no?
A reimbursement.
This signing. No, I mean this signing process we call now.
The
testing.
Yes.
Testing, yeah.
Test, yeah, exactly. We try to find a word which is not overused, where people have other expectation, like verify sounds too strong. We are not verifying accounts. It's attesting that the fiat transfer happened. Also the other peer is basically when he's confirming that he has received the money, he only will do it when he really receives the money. So when the fiat transfer has been confirmed by the other peer or attested by the other peer, then we know the account was used, and after 1 month, we have quite the security that the account was not a stolen bank account. And this tool, I think, gives quite a lot of security. The first, with the delay alone, it's based on the account age. When you have, we assume that stolen bank account scammers want to cash out quickly and don't want to wait, but it's a weak assumption because when they find out they can do it in Bisq, not easy at the beginning, but easy after 2 months, then they just leave the account, don't use it. There is low risk that the account hack get discovered when they're not using it, and then start to cash out after 1 or 2 months. So we cannot rely much on this. It adds some cost with the delay for scammers, but not providing really strong security. So the idea how we implemented is that a new user who has not traded yet and has a fresh account has to wait when he's the buyer. It's only for the fiat buyer and only for those payment methods where there are some chargeback risks, like cash deposit or face-to-face trade or Swish. There's some super secure like Swish or Swedish. There's super low risk that there would be any scam there. Very proper and solid system. And the other, some other method like face-to-face trade, not subject to chargeback scam. So it's only applied to those like SEPA, National Bank Transfer, Zelle, Integ, Revolut, and so on. And then the payout will be delayed for 30 days, which is of course quite a hurdle. And after 30 days, so when you would create your account today and don't do trading, and after 1 month you start your first trade, it will be still forever 2 weeks. So I think earlier it was discussed for 1 week, but then I thought a scammer could wait this time, and 1 week is still a little bit too short. What we've seen, I think the first reports of chargeback was roughly 1 week, and that's already, he could still try to cash out quickly and could create some damage. 2 weeks is already quite likely that it gets discovered, and then he cannot cash out anything because then all end up in dispute and he'd never get his money, his Bitcoin. And another thing, we wanted to make the security deposit for the buyer depending on these production tools, but we found out that doesn't work from usability side point of view. So we increased the minimum security deposit for the buyer from currently 5% to 15%. It's an open question, what's here the right number, but 15% for a $100 trade. And we have seen the scammer has traded, the cheapest was $80. Usually most were 500-600 euro. But the lowest amount was 89 or 87 euro. So they also make small trades. And 15% for $100 trade is $15. It's already some costs. It's not super high. But because we are not flexible with this, so it will affect all buyers basically. Also the minimum, it can be higher. The maker is defining what has to be the deposit for the buyer, and it can go up to 50%. That's the maximum. We don't want to go too high because it could introduce new problems that people are becoming much more dishonest and nasty in disputes, and it becomes more harder for the arbitrator than for tiny mistakes they request and that they get the security deposit of the other peer, and then 100% or so is a lot of money, of course. So it would become more complicated for the arbitrator to make the right judgment. And the default will be 20% at the moment. Also, that's the suggested number. It's all up to discussion still, but we need to get it final soon. So there's not much time left to change much here. Also, 15% is the minimum security deposit for the buyer forever. It doesn't matter what account or security he has and so on. And when he has never received such a signature, such an attestation from another trader, he always will stick with this 2 weeks of delay of the payout delay. And of course, the delay affects both traders. For the seller, it's not so important because he has received the fiat, but he also wants his security deposit back, which is still small. We don't change the seller's security deposit, so it's not a big issue, but it's a usability annoyance that you have to go online again after 2 weeks and have basically this trade longer time in your pending trade list and have to take care of it.
Manfred, how do we handle arbitration for the releasing of the payout and deposit? For example, if the seller forgets to start up the BISC client for 1 or 2 days?
I fear that will be one of the problems here, that will happen for sure often, because the seller, he doesn't care so much. For him, it's not so much money. Maybe we need to increase it a little bit, also the seller deposit, for this reason. And I think we have to be more tolerant here, because we're adding more burden to the traders, and people have other stuff to do in life to take care about their trades on BISC, so we have to be a little bit more tolerant, probably also with increasing the delay or the time what they have time for responding. At the moment they have to respond in 2 days, otherwise they are basically have lost the case when they're not responding. But I think with all these changes, when we stay super strict, we are losing too many users because they get frustrated. They maybe were on holiday or whatever and didn't have the internet connection, and then they lose the security deposit and feel frustrated. So we have to avoid this to add too much negative impact on the users. And at the end, I mean, this 2 days is super short when you compare it to any normal exchange. Usually you wait 1 week for any information, and then it takes a month until your stuff get resolved. When I did normal trades and ended up in some customer care cases, I think it was never resolved in less like 2 weeks. And communication, everything was super slow. For every email, you wait 3-4 days for the next reply. So I think we can relax also that area a little bit then.
Sorry, Manfred, we could think about adding it to the mobile client. You can create kind of delayed push notifications client side, just as a reminder, which doesn't need then to have the client online as well. So it would then be just triggered for the mobile client. Maybe an idea.
Yeah, would be very good. Yeah, and then the second protection tool with the signature, as soon as you are trading with, or either you have traded already and you had once the dispute with fiat and the fiat was transferred, then you are by default already a authorized user, we call it, and you don't have this delay anymore. So when you're the buyer, you don't have any delay. When the other is the buyer, then there's still the delay. The security deposit, unfortunately, will stay the same because we can. It's a little bit complicated to explain, but it doesn't work that because the maker, when he creates the offer, he doesn't know who will take the offer, and the maker is defining the security deposit for the buyer. So basically, we cannot be flexible and dynamic here because he doesn't know who will be the taker. And as soon when you are more new user, you should try to get a trade with somebody who is an authorized user, because only those can sign you. Another new user cannot give you a signature, and it doesn't help you to get to the next level. And when you have made a trade with such a user, as soon as the fiat has been confirmed by the other user, by the seller, both are signing each other, and also only the one who is already authorized signed the other. And from this moment on, it's only proven that you have used the account, not more. And from this moment on, the time counts, and after 1 month, we are considering it safe, and you are authorized as well after this 1 month, and you are getting the next level of account trust, or whatever we call it. But we have 3 different account levels: bronze, silver, and gold. Bronze is basically the default for newbies, and when you never get in the second, so when you have made a trade where you get authorized your account after 1 month, you move to silver. That's the only way how you can escape bronze. When you never trade with authorized, you always stick with bronze, even if you have an account which is half a year old. Doesn't matter. because it's not really secure at the end when the scammer waits 3 months and leave his accounts, his stolen accounts. We don't want to give a wrong assumption that this is considered secure. And gold is still not 100% defined, probably after 2 or 3 months at the moment. I mean, there are some other protection tools in the pipeline, like this certificate idea, as well as BSQ bonding. Another interesting tool will be that we want to allow traders to communicate in a chat, the same chat system what we use in the arbitration. So as soon their trade has started, as soon as the deposit is published, the traders can communicate to each other. They don't need to. So when you don't want to, basically you have the option to say, no, I prefer to not communicate, but they can. There will be some clear rules to avoid social engineering scams and so on. And because everything is signed, when one would abuse it, it can be reported. It has to be reported by the other and to the arbitrator, and then the other lose his security deposit. And we assume that 50% of the disputes can be resolved by the peers, by themselves. They're usually small problems, and also it can help when you are trading with a newbie buyer and you want to get a little bit more security. You can try to communicate, maybe ask for some social media accounts, and do a little bit of rating. Shouldn't be a KYC, because that will be in the rules that you must not do a KYC, because then you are risking identity fraud, which is the bigger problem, like money lost. And you cannot be sure that the other peer is a scammer who will sell your scanned passport then on the black market and so on. But when you're willing to share the Twitter account and you can check, and maybe he's posting something that you can verify it. We will leave this to the users, how they use this, but it's an additional tool which can help people to build up trust a little bit and reduce risks. And when they have the feeling, yeah, that's a shady person, they still can open a dispute and can say, okay, I prefer to lose maybe my seller security deposit or a part of it because I feel insecure. And depends on the arbitrator. If the arbitrator see, okay, the other peer really reacted very strange and he has good reason to not trade with this. Yeah, it depends on the case. I would leave this open, but it's an extra tool which can be utilized as well. So the good thing is that I think with all those tools in place, it becomes really much more secure. I don't see any way how a stolen bank account scammer could succeed. I mean, there might be 1 or 2 cases in a year or so, because of course he could still wait and maybe it doesn't get detected for 1 month or even longer, and he could succeed. But the probability is super low, and for a scammer, it's not. He will not earn money, because yeah, he will risk much more on security deposit and on accounts what he can cash out and which get blocked, and that he can win. And scammers are lazy, so why they should work and try to, yeah, when they don't have big success rate, big chance of success. So I assume that we can really close this weakness that stolen bank account scammers can abuse BISC for cashing out. The good thing is, I think we can attract new type of traders, like local Bitcoin traders who have avoided BISC because they didn't felt safe enough with the systems what we had. And I think when they understand the new system, I think they will be very attracted. The bad thing is, of course, it adds more cost for the new user and for usability, and especially for the more mainstream users. But I think there's no alternative. We have to fix the security weakness, otherwise it's killed. I mean, fiat trade when we have stolen bank account scam doesn't work. Point. And yeah, another thing what I forgot, we will add a kind of like a demo mode. So for a small trade amounts below 0.01 Bitcoin, which is roughly $50 at the moment, there are all those restrictions are not in place. It's basically like treated like a safe bank account, like a safe payment method, or like altcoin. Of course, for altcoin it doesn't exist as well. And yeah, for small trades, you just can trade like now. There is no extra limitations. The buyer security deposit will be still 15%. That doesn't change. The only thing where it's different is the altcoin maybe we could also make smaller biosecurity deposit for the other payment methods, which are not falling into this riskier payment methods. That might be an option. I think that's not, that's doable. But for small amounts, also the 15% is not really a lot of money. And it's even better because when it's too small, the security deposit, people don't care anymore and they just forget about the trade. So, but yeah, and with this, people who just want to try out and get their first experience with Bisq, they still can trade and can do this with tiny amounts, and it's very low risk that scammers would make such small trades, because it adds a lot of risk for them. With every transaction, they are risking that they get discovered, and so we don't expect that there is big risk also. And if it would turn out that the scammer really would do then hundreds of such small trades, we can deactivate it in the worst case when that turns out that it's a hole where they would have used, but I assume that's not. And we could even lower it to go to $20 or something like this. But I think $50 is probably good enough at the moment. Yeah, all this discussion is mainly on the proposals. I mean, there are 3-4 proposals for all these different aspects, or mainly 2 for the delayed payout and the other for the signature stuff, and then a third one for the UI. And the certificate part is for future, that's more effort to get implemented. And the BSQ bonding, there is no proposal yet. Actually, it might lead to the same concept like the off-chain trade protocol. So maybe they can be combined at some point or whatever. It's probably a little bit more complex also to do it properly. Yeah, that's it. So when you want to add any ideas, or when you have any whatever suggestions for changes, please do it now, because we're working on it, and after 2 or 3 days it should be already implemented mainly, and then we cannot change it anymore. Also, those numbers and those parameters are more or less fixed. It's hard to change. There is some flexibility, but it breaks backward compatibility with trades. So old users who have not updated cannot trade with you when you have updated, when some parameters have changed. We had this in the past a few times already. It's not terrible. It's a problem, and people end up in disputes or whatever. But it's also, when it's really important, we can do it. But we should get the numbers and the parameters right from the beginning, and don't have to think carefully that they are really working and don't need to be changed. To make it too dynamic, it's just it gets all much more complex and difficult, and it's already enough complex like it is. This signing thing is a quite interesting element. It's basically a decentralized reputation system, and those are big challenges and basically unsolved problems. But we have the benefit that we have some sort of scarce resources and some trusted elements, like the arbitration. Also, the root trust starts with these cases in the arbitrators. The arbitrators are trusted persons, so they are giving the trust root. And a payment account is considered as a scarce resource. You cannot create hundreds of payment accounts. It has some value for you, the payment account. You want to reuse it. And with this, all those elements make it possible that we are building such a root or a chain or a tree of trust, which starts from those accounts which get signed by the arbitrators. And then as soon as you are signed, you can sign the next, and then the next, and the next. And so it goes up. It can be verified by going down again. So it's a little bit like with BSQ. To verify a BSQ transaction, you have to follow it back, that it has an origin in the Genesis transaction or in the issuance transaction. Otherwise, it's not BSQ. And here you have to follow back the signatures back to this root where the arbitrators have signed the traders. And when there's a user who was signed by this, it's valid. Otherwise, it's invalid. Goodie. That's actually Oscar would you be interested to help me on this signing part? Because that's still open. I've just started with the very beginning. It's quite complex to get this recursive verification. So I started with the basics, but it's still not done. And all the rest, and especially the UI, to get this really working is quite a lot of work. And I fear I need the whole week. And next week I start traveling. So from Monday or Tuesday on, I cannot work for basically a week. So, and we should get this out as soon as possible, because at the moment, Intech is completely banned in Canada, and Zaper, our main markets are banned. Also, some countries, I don't want to make it public exactly which countries. Some countries are banned, and people end up in disputes and so on. So it's a pain in the ass. We are losing users for sure the longer this takes. So we are under heavy time pressure to get this out as soon as possible, but we have to get it out in a quality. It has to work, of course, and from usability, it has to be in a good quality that we are not losing use because everybody get completely upset and confused. So that's quite the challenge, and I think probably I cannot manage to get the signing part done as well. Then when we only roll out the first, then it's not really super secure. It's adds some security, but not the full security. And the second problem is then we have to change again the UI part, because certain elements like this attestation from authorized user has to be deactivated and not displayed, and then we have to activate it. So it makes everything more complicated again. So basically, it would be good when we have the development force to implement everything. At the moment, we are very short. It's mainly me and Christoph has also a little bit, cannot work so much like usually at the moment. So when you would be available to work, to leave at the moment, make full stop on all the rest and switch over to this 100%, that would be cool, because then we have some chance to get everything done until Monday maybe. Would this be possible for you, Oscar? Or are you completely in the middle of stuff and say, no, I don't want to get distracted with something completely different? I can give you a briefing afterwards about the details, what's open and what need to be done.
Yes, I can do it.
Perfect. Maybe after the call, we just continue and I give you an overview about the details. Cool. And yeah, regarding the concept, Manuel is basically the mastermind behind all these ideas. It was all based on his ideas. Thanks a lot. And I think also he's super strong with concept. Also, like this certificate proposal, that's really created a new standard how to write proposal and on the level of detail and professionality. So I'm super happy with this. Thanks a lot. And I would also see you as the kind like our lead on the conceptual side. Maybe you can. I didn't have time yet to look into the answers on the proposal. I will read afterwards, or maybe we can also continue discussing it after the call. If these numbers are right, if there are still like, this assumption that earlier we had 1 week delay afterwards, but then I increased it to 15 days now. There's still a few things I think it's worth to think good about it, because when we put in wrong assumptions that we assume the delay is good enough to keep the scammers out, in reality it's not. We are building the system in a wrong way. And as said, these parameters to change later are hard, so we should really get it right, the parameters. And it's also from the user perspective, it seems it's a big issue, this 2 weeks delay forever. But at the end, everybody want to get trades with the authorized user, because that's the only way how to get the silver level. And when you are in bronze level, you will pay a higher price. It will all have effect on the trade price. You are not as trustworthy, and that will be reflected in the price. So everybody will try to get a trade. Also, when you are a silver user, then you can sign others and everybody want to trade with you. When you cannot do this, you're a second-class trader in a way. So we can assume that everybody want to get signed as soon as possible, even if with a small trade or so. And then he has to wait anyway 1 month, and then this 2 week delay has no effect anyway. So it's important to really think from different aspects about this a few times, because it's quite quite complex and yeah, it's difficult to get it really right and not make some mistakes in wrong assumptions, which at the end doesn't really work or don't make a lot of sense in the way how it will play out in reality. And also what we've learned from the scammers, also some chargeback came after 3 weeks, some where we know it's a sender who has done chargebacks. The chargeback still have not arrived after nearly 4 weeks or more than 3 weeks. So some banks, it seems that the bank of the victim is probably fast with starting the process to request back the money from the other banks, but the receiving bank sometimes are slow, and it's very different. Some are faster and some are slower, and then it can take maybe even up to 4 or 5 weeks or so. We will see after the next weeks or so how it is the final picture, more or less. I mean, to give an overview about the scam, it's roughly 11,000 euro, the total damage, what the scammer could steal. I hope that there are not too many cases still coming from, time to time I get new reports still from users, but not so much anymore. So I hope it's more or less roughly the final number. And I think he used, with SEPA, I think there were 4 bank accounts used, or 3, where he really managed to cash out. All the others he just used for trading, but he couldn't do the fiat transfer. And that was something like 14, 15 accounts what he had. There are a few false positives. Christoph told me before, there's a guy complaining on the forum now that the arbitrators try to scam him. What I heard from the arbitrator, he's very suspicious. He said that he's operating for a Bitcoin club. He's probably Russian from his language style and from his background, what he said. and he used German accounts from female accounts. Also, the scammer has quite a lot of female accounts. There are not so many female Bitcoin traders. It's very suspicious that the Russian guy managed to get trust from German women who are willing that he can trade on behalf for them. So it's very sketchy. Maybe he's not a scammer or doing some other weird stuff what we don't have any clue, but he rejects all kind of verification. Also about, he cannot provide any evidence about his story. So he's blocked, and he's considered as maybe not 100% a scammer, but at least as a weird guy who is doing something what we cannot support. And basically this way that people are trading in behalf of somebody else cannot be supported anyway in future anymore with this account verification. And also a problem will be with Revolut. With Revolut, you cannot verify the other peer, and with that you cannot sign. And we have to be more strict with this, and either find a payment method for Revolut, because it's very popular, but to not allow it that Revolut is used for paying for a SEPA trade, because that's a security hole then, and or he never gets signed. But we have to make it very clear in the UI that when people are confirming the receipt, they only can, because with this button click they're doing the signing, and it's a liability in a way. When they would confirm that they have received money from somebody, and then this is the scammer, then they get asked why they have signed this, and they are basically suspect of collusion with the scammer, and that's a criminal activity at the end. So it has to be very clear to the user that they only confirm when the payment details are 100% the same. When there are even small mistakes, they have to open a dispute. Any input or questions, discussions?
Regarding the scammer, no. It's the person who might be a scammer. He even posted bank account details in the public forum.
Yeah, that's a no-go as well.
So it's only from even if he's a legit businessman, he shouldn't be trusted with.
He's at least an idiot.
Other accounts. Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing what we heard from the arbitrators, these scammers, they have very bad communication style. So super unfriendly, bad English, as it sounds like Eastern European, but of course it can be something else as well, but at least not native speakers and not educated people, because educated people have a proper English usually. Also, educated people can be from other countries as well who don't have good English. I don't want to say this, but from their style, how they react, yeah, super unfriendly, and they're not usually whatever. You can detect them from their communication style, and I think that's why this was when we add this chat system also, it can help, because yeah, when you communicate with those people, you can quickly see, okay, that's a shady person or not, and I'm not 100% sure if it really helps much, but could be used maybe. Goodie, then let's wrap it up here. And Christoph, Emmanuel, and Oscar, maybe you stay and we keep discussing the stuff. Anybody else, of course, can stay as well, or if you like, we can keep it public open, but I think it's already more than 1 hour. I don't want to keep the calls too long. And it's more about this technical implementation details. Things not so super interesting for a public. But if Steve or Stefan, if you want to stick around, of course, you're welcome. But yeah, it's detailed implementation discussion, so maybe not so interesting for you. Okay, then see you and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.